My wife called my mother a burden. She said it at our dinner table, in front of our friends. And I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't defend. I just smiled, helped my mom to her feet, packed our bags, and left her forever. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. I'm not proud of how calm I was that night, but I'll tell you this much. I've never been more certain about anything in my life. You ever reach a moment where something inside you just clicks? No fireworks, no screaming, just a quiet switch flipping from love to clarity. That was me. It was a Thursday evening, early fall, cool breeze drifting in through the half-open kitchen window. We had guests over, Tom and Lisa from down the street, and my coworker David with his wife Jennifer. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a decent bottle of red wine, the kind of dinner that says, "We're doing fine, we're stable, we've built something good." At least, that's what I thought. My mother, Evelyn, had been living with us for 8 months by then. 8 months since her hip surgery. 8 months since the doctor gently told me she shouldn't be alone anymore. Now listen, my mom raised me by herself. My dad walked out when I was 6. She worked double shifts at the diner, came home smelling like coffee and grease, still found time to help with homework. She didn't complain, not once. So when she needed me, there was no debate in my mind. Family takes care of family. Sarah, my wife, had agreed at the time. Or at least, she said she did. She smiled when we moved Mom's recliner into the living room. She told friends it was temporary. She even helped set up the guest room for her. But if I'm being honest, there were small things. The size when Mom's walker scraped against the hardwood. The way Sarah would leave the room mid-conversation when Mom repeated a story. The tightening of her jaw whenever I reminded her about Mom's medication schedule. Tiny cracks. Nothing loud enough to confront, just enough to feel. That Thursday, everything looked normal. Candles lit, plates set neatly. Sarah wore that blue dress I bought her last anniversary. She laughed at Tom's joke about football season. She refilled glasses like the perfect hostess. Mom was quiet, mostly listening. She didn't like being the center of attention. Every now and then she'd lean toward me and whisper, "You've got good friends, Mickle." And I'd squeeze her hand under the table. Then it happened. Lisa mentioned how hard it must be having an elderly parent at home. Just casual conversation. "I don't know how you do it," she said, smiling politely. "That's a lot of responsibility." Before I could answer, Sarah laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a soft chuckle. A sharp one. "Well," she said, swirling her wine, "it's not exactly what I signed up for. I married a husband, not a retirement home." A couple people shifted in their seats. I felt it, that shift in the air. Mom lowered her eyes. Sarah didn't stop. "Sometimes it feels like we're just stuck," she added. "Like we're dragging around a burden nobody asked for." Burden. That word didn't echo. It didn't explode. It just landed. Heavy. Right there on the table between the mashed potatoes and the wine glasses. Mom tried to smile. God bless her, she tried. "Oh, honey, I don't mean to be trouble," she said softly. And that's when something inside me went very still. I didn't snap. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't defend with some big speech about loyalty and sacrifice. I looked at Sarah. She avoided my eyes. And in that silence, that thin, fragile silence, I realized something I should have realized months ago. This wasn't frustration. This was resentment. And resentment doesn't go away. It grows. I stood up slowly, helped my mom push her chair back, told our guests, "Excuse us for a moment." I think they thought I was going to argue with her in the kitchen. I didn't. I walked Mom down the hallway. And that's when I made the decision that would change everything. But to understand why I didn't fight, why I didn't even try to salvage it, you need to understand what I thought I had before that night. Because sometimes the real betrayal isn't the insult. It's realizing the person you loved was already gone long before they said it. Before that dinner, I believed I had built something solid. Sarah and I had been married 12 years. Not flashy years. Not the kind you post about every week online. Just steady ones. We met at a friend's barbecue. She was wearing jeans and a Cardinals cap, laughing louder than anyone else in the yard. I remember thinking, that woman knows how to enjoy life. And for a long time, she did. We bought our house 6 years into the marriage. A two-story place in a quiet neighborhood where kids rode bikes in the evenings and neighbors waved without needing a reason. The kind of street where Christmas lights stayed up a little too long and nobody minded. Our life had rhythm. I worked steady hours. Sarah handled most of the social calendar. Sunday mornings meant coffee on the back porch. Friday nights meant takeout and some mindless TV. We didn't have children. That was something we both agreed on early. But we filled our space with routines, shared jokes, and plans for travel once we slowed down. It wasn't perfect. No marriages. But it felt grounded. When my mom fell and broke her hip, everything shifted, but not in a way I thought would break us. I remember sitting at the hospital, fluorescent lights humming overhead, holding Mom's hand while she drifted in and out of sleep. The doctor had pulled me aside and said gently, "She can't live alone anymore, Mickle. Not safely." There wasn't even a pause in my mind. Of course she'd come live with us. When I told Sarah, she hesitated, just for a breath. Then she nodded and said, "We'll make it work." Those words meant everything to me. And for a while, we did make it work. We rearranged furniture, installed grab bars in the bathroom. I set alarms on my phone for medications. Sarah picked out new curtains for Mom's room, said it would make the space feel less clinical. On the surface, we were a team. But teams can drift without you noticing. Mom moved slower than either of us. She repeated stories. She needed help standing sometimes. She watched old black and white movies in the living room and kept the volume louder than necessary. Little disruptions. Sarah started spending more time out with friends. Book clubs. Wine nights. Extra errands that somehow took hours. She said she needed breathing room. I didn't argue. Caregiving is heavy, even when you love the person. But I was the one waking up at night when Mom called out. I was the one scheduling appointments. I was the one quietly absorbing the strain. Still, I told myself this was temporary. A season. Marriage goes through seasons, right? The house itself felt different. Quieter in some ways. Tenser in others. Sarah's laughter became rarer at home. More frequent when she was out. Sometimes I catch her staring at the hallway, where Mom's walker sat folded against the wall. Her expression unreadable. And there were comments. Subtle ones. I just miss it being us. I didn't think this would be long-term. We never get alone time anymore. None of them cruel. None of them loud. Just small reminders that the balance had shifted. Now, let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Because that's what I did. Ignored it. I told myself she was just adjusting. I told myself love meant patience. I told myself that if I carried more of the load, she wouldn't feel overwhelmed. I even started taking Mom to the park during Sarah's evenings home, just to give her space. I thought I was protecting the marriage. Looking back, I realized something hard. You can't protect a relationship alone. There were nights Sarah would come to bed later than usual. I'd ask, "Everything okay?" She'd say, "Just tired." She'd turn away, already distant, and I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater, convincing myself that this was normal strain. The house still stood. The bills were paid. We still hosted dinners. On the outside, nothing was broken, but inside something was thinning. It wasn't until that Thursday night, when the word burden slipped so easily from her mouth, that I understood the truth. Resentment doesn't start with cruelty. It starts with quiet withdrawal, and I had been pretending not to see it. The night of that dinner wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was just the first time she stopped hiding it. After I helped Mom down the hallway that night, I didn't rush. That's the thing people don't understand. When something breaks inside you, sometimes you move slower, not faster. I sat her down on the edge of her bed. She kept apologizing. "I shouldn't have said anything at dinner," she whispered. "I should have stayed quiet." That hurt more than Sarah's words. My mother, the woman who worked 2 jobs so I could have school shoes that fit, apologizing for existing in my house. I knelt in front of her and said, "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom." And I meant it. My voice was steady. Too steady. From down the hallway, I could hear dishes clinking. Guests murmuring in low voices. Sarah laughing, a tight, brittle sound, trying to smooth it over. I stood there for a moment, listening, and something clicked into place. But here's what most folks don't know. That dinner wasn't the first incident that week. It was just the loudest. 3 days earlier, I come home from work earlier than expected. A meeting got canceled. I remember pulling into the driveway and noticing Sarah's car wasn't there. No big deal. She ran errands. That was normal. When I walked inside, Mom was sitting in the living room, television off. Just quiet. "Where's Sarah?" I asked. She said she needed air. Mom replied gently. She seemed upset. Upset about what? I wondered. Later that evening, Sarah came home. I asked if everything was all right. She shrugged. "Just tired of feeling like this house isn't mine anymore." That sentence stayed with me. Isn't mine anymore. I tried to reassure her. Told her we were adjusting. Told her Mom wouldn't be this dependent forever. Sarah nodded, but her eyes didn't soften. Then there was the phone call. The night before the dinner. I was in the kitchen refilling Mom's water when I heard Sarah on the patio. Her voice was low, but the sliding door was cracked open. "I didn't sign up to be a caregiver," she said. Pause. "I feel trapped." I didn't step outside. I didn't confront her. I stood there holding that glass of water, staring at the sink. "Now, I'm going to ask you something straight. What would you have done right then? Would you have walked out and demanded answers? Or would you have done what I did and waited? Drop your answer below. I genuinely want to know. Because I chose to wait. I told myself overhearing half a conversation isn't proof of anything. I told myself marriage deserves patience, not paranoia. But that word again, trapped. It echoed the same way burden would echo later. On Thursday afternoon, before the guests arrived, I noticed something else. Sarah was cleaning aggressively. Not her usual tidy sweep. She was moving Mom's things slightly out of sight. Folding the blanket from Mom's recliner. Shifting the pill organizer from the kitchen counter to a cabinet. "Just wanted to look nice," she said when I raised an eyebrow. And that's when my instincts really stirred. It wasn't about cleanliness. It was about image. That night, at the dinner table, when Lisa mentioned caregiving being hard, I saw the flash in Sarah's eyes before she spoke. That half second of decision. The choice to say what she'd been holding in. And when she said it, when she labeled my mother a burden, it wasn't impulsive. It was relief. Relief at finally saying what she believed. Sitting on the edge of Mom's bed afterward, I realized something uncomfortable. Sarah hadn't just grown resentful of the situation. She had grown resentful of me. Of the time I gave Mom. Of the attention I diverted. Of the loyalty I refused to compromise. That's a dangerous kind of resentment. Because it doesn't ask for compromise. It asks for removal. And in that quiet bedroom, as Mom adjusted her blanket and tried to make herself smaller in her own space, I understood the crossroads I was standing at. I could fight for my marriage, or I could protect my mother's dignity. But deep down, I already knew. You can't stay married to someone who sees your parent as disposable. I stepped back into the hallway, and Sarah was waiting at the end of it, arms crossed, jaw tight. That's when the real conversation began. Sarah was standing there like she'd rehearsed something, arms crossed, chin lifted just slightly. Not angry, defensive. "There's a difference. Are you seriously going to make a scene over that?" she asked before I even spoke. A scene. That word told me everything about how she viewed what just happened. Not as cruelty. Not as a wound. Just social discomfort. I kept my voice low. "You called my mother a burden." She exhaled sharply. "Oh my God, Mickle." It was a figure of speech. Everyone knows taking care of someone full-time is hard. "She heard you," I said. "She's overly sensitive." That's when I felt the first crack in my composure. Not rage. Not shouting. Just a deep, hollow shift. We stepped into the kitchen, so the guests wouldn't overhear. The hallway light cast shadows across her face. She looked tired. Annoyed. Not regretful. "I feel like I don't exist in my own house," she said. "Everything revolves around her schedule. Her needs. Her doctor appointments. We can't even travel. We can't host properly. I'm exhausted." There it was again. Her. Not us. Not we. Her. I listened. I truly did. I let her speak uninterrupted. She talked about feeling sidelined. About losing spontaneity. about how she thought this arrangement would be short-term. Then she said something that I don't think she realized would change everything. You always choose her over me. That sentence landed heavier than the word burden, because it wasn't about caregiving anymore. It was about competition. I need you to understand something here. This wasn't just an argument about space or stress. This was my whole life being weighed like a negotiation. Have you ever been blindsided like this? Someone you trusted completely, just revealing a truth that shakes you to your core? If you've been there, you know how quiet the world gets in that moment. I asked her calmly, "What exactly do you expect me to choose?" She didn't hesitate. There are facilities. Good ones. She'd have nurses. Activities. It's not like you'd be abandoning her. Facilities. I stared at her, searching for some flicker of softness. She doesn't want to live in a facility, I said slowly. She wants to be with family. And I want my husband back, Sarah snapped. Silence filled the kitchen. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices beyond that. Just two people standing across from each other, realizing they were no longer on the same team. I thought about the past 8 months. The late nights. The sighs. The distance in bed. The way she'd flinch when Mom called my name. This wasn't sudden. It was built, layer by layer, and I had been smoothing those layers down, pretending they weren't stacking into something sharp. I asked her one last question. If it were your mother, what would you do? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes shifted away. That's different, she muttered. No, it wasn't. That's when I knew. This wasn't stress talking. This was values. And when values don't align, love struggles to breathe. From the dining room, I could hear David clearing his throat awkwardly. Someone laughed too loudly. The dinner was unraveling without us. Sarah finally said, quieter now. I can't keep living like this. And I realized something chilling. She wasn't asking for compromise. She was drawing a line. Me or my mother. There it was. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a simple ultimatum hidden inside a complaint. And in that moment, standing in my own kitchen, looking at the woman I'd built 12 years with, I felt something close. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Clarity. Because the woman I married would never have forced that choice. The woman in front of me had already decided which side she stood on. The lowest point wasn't the insult. It was understanding that my marriage had quietly turned into a negotiation of loyalty. And I knew negotiations like that don't end well. After that kitchen conversation, something inside me settled. Not in a dramatic way. Not with fireworks or fury. Just settled. I walked back into the dining room first. Smiled politely. Apologized for the interruption. Told everyone we'd had a small misunderstanding. People nodded, grateful for the excuse. They finished their wine faster than usual. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty. Front door closed. Silence. Sarah retreated upstairs without another word. I didn't follow her. Instead, I went down the hallway and knocked softly on Mom's door. She was sitting in her recliner now, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. I'll go wherever you need me to go, Mickle, she said quietly before I even opened my mouth. I don't want to ruin your marriage. That right there, that broke something and built something at the same time. I sat down across from her, looked at her face, older now, softer, lined with years she never complained about. You're not ruining anything, I told her. You hear me? You're not the problem. And as I said it, I knew it was true. I stepped outside onto the back porch for a moment. Cool air. Dark sky. The kind of quiet that lets you think clearly. I leaned against the railing and let the truth wash over me. Marriage is built on shared values, and ours had split. Now here's the part people expect to be loud. The yelling, the confrontation, the dramatic exit. That's not how it happened. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't threaten. I planned. 40% of that next hour was logistics. 30% was emotion. The rest was resolve hardening. I already had something Sarah didn't know about. A small house I'd inherited from my uncle the year before. I'd been renting it out, modest income, nothing flashy. It was empty now. 10 minutes away. At the time, I'd thought of it as an investment. That night, it became an option. I called my friend Michael, late, but he answered. I need a truck tomorrow morning, I told him. He didn't ask questions. Just said, I've got you. Then I went back inside. Sarah was sitting on the edge of our bed when I entered, arms crossed again, but her expression had shifted. Less defensive, more expectant. Well, she asked. Well, what? I replied calmly. Are we going to talk about this? We already did. She blinked. So that's it. You're just choosing her. There it was again. Choosing. As if love for a parent and love for a spouse were competitors in some twisted contest. I'm choosing respect, I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being clear. There was a long pause. She waited for me to negotiate, to suggest counseling, to promise balance, to reassure her she'd come first. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the closet and pulled down 2 suitcases. She frowned. What are you doing? I folded my clothes carefully, not angrily, not hurried, just methodically. I'm not putting my mother somewhere she doesn't want to be, I said, and I'm not staying somewhere she's treated like an inconvenience. Her voice rose slightly. So you're just leaving? Over one comment? No, I replied, zipping the suitcase. Over what that comment revealed. Here's where I want to ask you something. When trust cracks like that, do you fight harder? Or do you walk away with dignity? Do you believe in revenge or in peace? I didn't slam doors. I didn't humiliate her publicly. I chose something quieter. I chose exit. But make no mistake, quiet can be powerful. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting my line. Sarah stared at me like she didn't believe I'd follow through. Maybe she thought I'd cool off overnight. Maybe she assumed I'd always choose compromise. But compromise only works when both sides bend. And that night, she didn't bend. So I finished packing. And for the first time in 12 years, I felt something strange. Not heartbreak. Freedom. Morning was coming. And with it the final step. Morning came quiet. No slammed doors. No shouting. Just the soft gray light, slipping through the curtains, like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. I was already dressed when Sarah came downstairs. Jeans. Boots. Calm. I'd made coffee. Out of habit, I guess. And poured a cup for myself. Not for her. She stopped at the bottom step when she saw the suitcases by the door. You're serious, she said. Yes. Her eyes scanned the room, like she expected someone to jump out and say this was all a bluff. When no one did, her voice sharpened. You're overreacting. I didn't respond. Michael's truck pulled into the driveway right on time. The engine cut off. The sound echoed in the quiet street. Sarah stepped closer. Mickle, don't do this. We can talk about facilities. Maybe just temporary. Temporary. Funny how that word keeps showing up when people want you to compromise your principles. I walked down the hallway to Mom's room. She was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands folded. You sure about this? She asked softly. I've never been more sure about anything. I helped her stand. Slow steps. Walk her steady against the hardwood. Sarah stood frozen in the living room as we passed. This is insane, she muttered. You're throwing away 12 years. I stopped, turned to face her. No, I said evenly. I'm refusing to throw away the woman who gave me life. That's when everything changed. And I want you to be honest with me here. Are you rooting for me right now? Or do you think I went too far? Be real in the comments. Uncle Mickle can take it. Because here's the truth. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even loud. I was final. Michael came inside, gave Sarah a nod that said he understood more than she thought. We carried the suitcases out first. Then Mom's recliner. The one Sarah always complained took up too much space. It felt symbolic. Each piece leaving that house felt like reclaiming something. Sarah followed us onto the porch. You're humiliating me, she said under her breath. No, I replied. I'm leaving quietly. She laughed once, sharp, bitter. You think you're some hero right now. I shook my head. No, I think I'm a son. That hit her harder than yelling ever could have. The neighbor's curtains shifted slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice movement. Morning routines don't stop for personal collapse. Mom was settled in the truck first. I buckled her seatbelt carefully. When I turned back toward the house, Sarah was standing in the doorway. The same doorway we'd carried furniture through when we first moved in. The same doorway where she'd kissed me after our honeymoon. Now at framed distance. "You're really choosing this?" she asked, voice quieter now. "I already did," I said. And that was it. No screaming match. No dramatic confession. No grand speech. Just a door closing. I climbed into the driver's seat. Michael tapped the hood and headed back to his own car. As I pulled away, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. Sarah was still standing there. Small. Still. Shocked. Not because I defended my mother, but because I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't negotiate. I simply left. And let me tell you something. Silence can be the loudest message of all. 10 minutes later, I was unlocking the door to the small house I'd inherited. Modest. Clean. Ours. I helped Mom inside. She looked around slowly. "It's peaceful," she whispered. Yeah, it was. Back at the old house, I knew Sarah would walk into an empty living room. No recliner. No pill organizer. No walker in the hallway. No husband. Just the echo of a word she couldn't take back. Burden. But here's the part people don't talk about. When you choose your values over comfort, it doesn't feel explosive. It feels steady. And that morning, as sunlight filled that little house, I realized something powerful. I hadn't destroyed my life. I'd drawn a boundary. And sometimes, that's the most devastating move of all. The first night in the new house was quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not empty. Just honest. Mom sat in her recliner. Yes, we brought it. Positioned by the front window. The place wasn't big, but it had good light. Hardwood floors. A small kitchen. 2 bedrooms. It didn't echo with tension. It breathed. I ordered pizza that evening. We ate off paper plates. Mom kept apologizing between bites, like she still felt responsible for the shift in my life. "You don't have to give up your marriage for me," she said softly. I looked at her across that little dining table and realized something. I hadn't given it up. It had already fractured. I didn't lose something solid. I told her. I let go of something that couldn't hold. And that was the truth. The next few days were practical. Address changes. A few furniture transfers. Conversations with a lawyer about separation paperwork. I didn't drag it out. I didn't lash out. I handled it like a man closing a chapter that had already been read. Sarah called twice the first week. The first call was anger. "You made me look heartless," she said. "People are talking." I listened. Then I said calmly, "I didn't tell anyone anything. You told them who you were." Silence on the other end. The second call was different. Quieter. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she admitted. That one hurt more than the insult, because it revealed something deep. She believed I'd always choose comfort over principle. She believed I'd negotiate my boundaries. But here's what I've learned. People test the limits of your loyalty when they think it has no edge. Now let me pause here and ask you something real. Looking back at your hardest moments, would you handle them differently? Or did the pain force you into becoming someone stronger? I've replayed that night in my mind more than once. Not to regret it, but to understand it. Because endings are complicated. There were moments, late at night, when the house was quiet and Mom asleep, when I felt the weight of 12 years. Photos boxed up. Shared memories. Inside jokes that no longer had a place to land. Grief doesn't disappear just because you're right. It lingers. But here's the strange part. Peace lingered too. No tight air in the kitchen. No guarded glances. No underlying resentment humming beneath every conversation. Mom's health even improved. Less stress. More sunlight. We started simple routines. Morning tea by the window. Short walks down the driveway with her walker. Old movies in the afternoon. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Friends eventually reached out. Some surprised. Some quietly supportive. Tom stopped by one afternoon and said, "You did what most men talk about but don't do." I didn't feel heroic. I felt aligned. The divorce finalized without fireworks. We divided assets fairly. I kept the inherited house. She kept the larger one. I heard later she'd moved closer to the city. Smaller place. More freedom, as she called it. I hope she found what she was missing. Truly. Because resentment eats people alive if they don't confront it. As for me, life became simpler. I worked. I cared for Mom. I rebuilt my routine without trying to fill silence with noise. There's a maturity that comes from loss. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing loneliness. You realize dignity weighs more than comfort. Would I do it exactly the same way again? I think so. Not because it was easy, but because it was clean. And clean endings, even painful ones, let you sleep at night. I won't pretend there weren't lonely evenings. I won't pretend I never questioned if I could have compromised more. But every time I heard Mom laugh softly during one of her old movies, I knew. Some choices cost you a relationship. Others cost you your self-respect. And I'd rather lose the first than the second. Still, there was one final conversation that brought everything full circle. And it happened months later, when I least expected it. About 6 months after I left, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. Nothing dramatic about it. No thunderclap moment. Just 2 shopping carts turning the same corner in the cereal aisle. She looked different. Not worse. Just older around the eyes. We stood there for a second, both adjusting to the reality of seeing someone who used to know your every routine. "How's your mom?" she asked quietly. "She's good," I replied. "Stronger." She nodded, looked down at her cart. There was something she wanted to say. I could see it hovering there. Regret has a posture. Shoulders slightly folded inward. Voice softer than pride allows. "I didn't mean it the way it came out," she finally said. I believed her. But here's the thing about words. Once they reveal a truth, you can't stuff that truth back into silence. "I know," I told her. "But you meant something." That wasn't cruelty. That was honesty. We talked for a few minutes. Civil, polite. Like 2 people who once shared a life and now share distance. When we parted, she said, "I hope you're happy." And I realized something surprising. I was. Not because everything turned out perfect. Not because the pain disappeared. But because I chose alignment over avoidance. Now let me ask you something. And I really want to hear your thoughts. When someone crosses a line that reveals their values don't match yours, what's the wiser move? Forgive and adapt? Or step away and protect your peace? There's no universal answer. Life isn't that simple. But I've learned this much. Forgiveness doesn't require proximity. You can forgive someone and still leave. You can love someone and still walk away. I forgave Sarah a long time ago. Not for her sake. For mine. Holding anger is like gripping a hot coal and expecting the other person to burn. But forgiveness didn't mean returning. Because boundaries matter. Mom passed peacefully 2 years later. In her sleep. In that little house filled with light. I was holding her hand. And in that quiet room, I felt no regret about the choice I made. None. Because in her final years, she never once felt like an inconvenience. She felt like family. And that's worth everything. Life has a way of testing what you truly stand for. Not in grand speeches. Not in obvious crossroads. But in small, uncomfortable moments at dinner tables. In quiet kitchens. In words spoken too casually. Character isn't built when everything is smooth. It's revealed when something cracks. So here's my final question for you. And I really want to hear your thoughts. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. We don't heal by pretending these stories don't hurt. We heal by telling them. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. At the end of the day, loyalty isn't about choosing sides. It's about choosing the values you can live with when the house goes quiet.